All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining me this morning. My name is Hannah. I work with the Livable Communities Act team, and I manage LCDA, TOD, and pre-development. This morning, we are going to be talking about the LCDA and TOD development grant opportunities that are opening up next Monday. And as I mentioned, this session is being recorded, and we'll post that recording to our website so you can refer back to it or share it with any of your colleagues who are unable to attend this morning. We generally try to get those recordings up within 3 days. If you have any questions throughout this session, please feel free to put them in the chat. I can answer as we go, and we also will have time at the end to do Q&A. So today's webinar is going to cover all of the essential information and technical details for the 2025 LCDA and TOD grant programs. I'll share an overview of the program goals, go over recent changes to the program from previous years, talk through some details like key dates, scoring, and eligible uses of grant funds. We also will go over an outline of some past successful projects and summarize all of the resources that are available to applicants. And then we will be able to end with some question and answer time. The goals for LCDA and TOD are very similar. Those shared goals are to maximize connections, create more housing choice in the project area, minimize impacts on climate change, and support a more equitable region. TOD projects do place more of an emphasis on dense development that are going to increase transit ridership. While compact and connected development is important in LCDA, there's just not an emphasis on increased transit ridership for projects that will be going in through the LCDA pot of funding. Before we talk about eligible cities, I do want to make a quick note of who can apply and who receives funds if you are awarded a grant. So only participating cities, counties, or development authorities like an HRA or an EDA can apply to Livable Communities Act grant programs. Developers or community partners will collaborate on the application with your government partner, but cannot submit the application. If you are awarded a grant, those grant funds will go to your government partner. They don't go directly to the development team, and then the government partner will pass the funds along to the development team. In order to participate in LCA, cities need to be part of the Local Housing Incentives Program and establish goals for affordable and life cycle housing. Right now, we have 78 cities participating in the program. LCA runs on a 10-year re-enrollment cycle, but cities can elect to participate at any point. And I just want to note that in addition to other application requirements, cities applying for projects that involve housing need to have an adopted fair housing policy in order to be able to receive funds. A city can apply without a fair housing policy and be awarded funds, but you won't be able to actually receive those funds until the policy is adopted. And for any city staff on the call, if you have any questions about enrolling, about adopting goals, please just let me know. I'm happy to get you connected with our housing team and make sure you get the resources that you need to be able to enroll. So we talked earlier about TOD and this emphasis on increasing transit ridership. TOD eligible areas are located throughout the region's transit network and are eligible to cities that meet those LCA requirements, which again, that's the Local Housing Incentives Program, adopting affordable and life cycle housing goals. You can find out if your project is in an eligible TOD area by going to our Make a Map tool on the LCA website. You just need to enter the address of your project and make sure that the TOD grant layer is checked. And I can add a link to that map towards the end of this session. All right, so changes that we have made since 2024. There are two big changes to the application and scoring process over the last couple of years. Previously, the applications went through a two-step scoring process. Applications needed to meet a step 1 score and a minimum equity score in order to advance into the next round of review. This year, all of the applications are going to be reviewed by a panel of internal council staff and external reviewers. There still is a minimum overall score and a minimum equity score that applicants need to meet to be eligible for funding, but there won't be that additional step of moving into a second round of review. The second substantial change that we have made for this year is that there is one single application for LCDA and TOD projects. So you don't need to choose if you're applying to LCDA or if you're applying to TOD. All projects that are located in a TOD area will answer a set of questions about your alignment to transit. If you're not in a TOD area, you don't need to worry about those questions. All of the projects that are located in a TOD area are also eligible for LCDA funds. So you can think of it as one pot of funding, and projects that are located in TOD areas will just answer slightly different questions than projects that are not located in TOD areas. For the 2025 LCDA program, we have $10 million of funding available to award. If eligible applications from suburban cities request more than 60% of our available funds, then no more than 40% of those funds will be awarded to Minneapolis and St. Paul. The math is incredibly easy this year with 10 million being available. There is $6 million available to projects outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and $4 million available to projects that are located in Minneapolis and St. Paul. The TOD pot of funding that we have is $5.7 million. With the TOD projects, there is a $2 million award per city. And projects do need to be located in a TOD area to be eligible for that pot of funding. Again, you can go to our website, look at that Make a Map tool, and check to see if your project is in an eligible area. Each city can submit up to 6 applications total. And again, you can just kind of think of the funding as coming from the same pot since you don't have to choose which program you're applying to. This just gives you an idea of how much funding is available. So going over some key dates for you to keep in mind, the application is going to open on July 7th, which is next Monday, and applications will be due on August 11th. We are keeping them open a little bit longer this year to give you some more time to work on the application. And on July 7th, when the applications open in our online application portal, we also will post a Word version of the application to our website. I really recommend working in the Word version of the application to do collaboration on the narrative questions, and then copying and pasting your answers from the Word document into our online application portal. The funding recommendations are expected to go to our council in late October, with final awards being recommended in mid-November. And as you're thinking about your timeline for your project, keep in mind that any activities that you start before the awards are recommended are not eligible for funding. The only exception to this is site acquisition, which can support purchases made within 1 year before the applications are due. The grants have a 3-year grant term, which means that all of your awarded activities need to be finished within 3 years of the award being approved. And if you need to, we can grant up to a 2-year extension. If you are awarded a grant and you need an extension, just make sure that you let our grants administrator know as soon as you can that you would like to request an extension. All right, so before we get into our next section about scoring and how LCA works, I'm just going to pause quickly here and see if there's any questions about what we have gone over so far. And again, you can raise your hand, you can come off mute, or you can put a question in the chat. Great.
Hey, I have a quick question. I have a quick
yeah,
question
go
for
ahead.
you. If you're awarded one of these grants,
Mhm.
are you eligible to pursue an additional grant in a different year if you have not spent the initial grant money?
Yes, you would be able to apply again. I think we would be looking for you to have spent some of the initial grant money in order to apply again. But we can talk about specific details of that if you would like, if you have a grant that you're already working on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so we have a question here. Is the 3-year grant term from the award date or is it from the subrecipient agreement execution? That is a great question. So the grant terms are actually done in kind of a 6-month cycle. So we typically would be looking at the award date rather than the date that the agreement is executed. All right. So
Hannah,
oh, yeah, another question?
yeah, can you just clarify? I may have missed it, but can you clarify the city? You said it's 6 applicants per city. Is that
Yes.
clear on here when you say that?
Yep, so we do have an application limit of 6 applications per city. And this is a great tee-up for our next slide. And I can go over exactly how this application process works and that partnership with the city. So like I had mentioned at the beginning, the application does need to come from a city, a county, or another development authority, like an EDA or an HRA. And if you are awarded a grant, our grant agreement is between the city and the council. For ease of explanation for the rest of this presentation, I'm just going to refer to the government partner as the city. 90% of the time it is the city, but just so I don't have to say city, county, development authority every time, we're just going to use city. So the city will apply in partnership with the development team. Developers cannot apply directly to LCA programs. Most cities will set up a separate subrecipient agreement with the development team, since again, our official agreement is with the city. And each city can submit up to 6 applications. Because Minneapolis and St. Paul have so much interest in the program, they each have a pre-application process to select the projects that they are going to sponsor and submit to us. And the pre-application for both of those cities has already closed. So if you have a project in Minneapolis or St. Paul that you are interested in, you can let me know. I can get you in touch with the folks at either of those cities and get you in line for next year. If you have read through the scoring tables, you will notice that our scoring has an emphasis on equitable development that includes equity criteria in each scoring category. And LCA is really focused on addressing racial inequity in the region, given that race is the largest predictor of inequitable outcomes in jobs, housing, and other LCA goals. So for all projects that are coming in through LCDA and TOD, projects addressing racial equity are going to be prioritized in scoring. Projects that are addressing other inequities will earn points towards how they are addressing those inequities, but won't receive full points unless they also are considering the intersection of racial inequity. And those explicit equity criteria are noted in the scoring tables for both programs. There's a total of 23 points that are related to the equity criteria, and applicants need to meet a minimum of 12 of those points in order to be eligible for funding consideration. All right, so getting into more of the scoring categories. So as I mentioned, the application is the same for both LCDA and TOD. There's just a slightly different set of questions for projects that are located in TOD areas. Excuse me, for each of these sections, we strongly recommend that you look at the evaluation explanations for each program. And I can drop a link in the chat to each of those towards the end of our session. These are documents that give you more information on exactly how we are going to be reviewing your application. So it includes questions that reviewers are going to be asking themselves and examples of how to achieve points in each one of the sections. The first scoring section that we have is the what, or the project outcomes. And in this section, we're looking at how well your project is addressing the program goals that we talked about at the beginning of the session. So we're scoring you here on housing, economic opportunity, compact and connected development, and environment and livability. So this category is looking at what your project is and what you're trying to achieve through this project. Deeper levels of affordable housing, including workforce development programs, focus on environmental justice, and introducing complementary uses into the project area are all examples of how a project could achieve some points in this section. And like I had mentioned, the TOD program does have an emphasis on connection to transit and increase in potential transit ridership. The next scoring section is the how, which has newly combined the process and the team section. If you applied a couple of years ago, there was a separate section for process and team. Last year and this year, it's just an overall how section. Here in this section, we are assessing how the community the project is intending to serve is being represented in your decision-making process. For example, this could include your community engagement process, how much influence that process has on the project, if members of your project team are from the area where the project is being developed, or partnerships that you develop as part of the project process. And again, the evaluation explanations have a list of examples of how you can achieve points in each one of these sections. In this section is where we also are going to be looking at what steps the city is taking to address inequities. So this would be something at the city level rather than at the project level. And this could include things like doing a study to understand disparities in homeownership, having an equity-focused reviews process, or participating in GARE, which is the Government Alliance for Racial Equity. All right, before we go into talking about eligible activities, I'm going to pause here and see if we have any questions around the scoring.
Yeah, and maybe with the link and evaluation, you can provide this, but is there a weighting option that, you know, one would score higher than the other as it relates to the subject matter at hand?
Yes, so each one of the sections has points associated with it, and I am just going to drop the documents here in the chat right now, and you can look through and see that each one of the sections has different points. So as you're thinking about your project and going through these scoring rubrics and explanations, pay attention to the number of points that are associated with each of the criteria, and that will give you a better idea of how they are weighted in our scoring. That's a great question. All right, so going into talking about eligible activities. So in your application, you will list out what specific activities you would like to fund using the grant money. There is a complete list of eligible and ineligible activities on the website and in that program essentials document that's linked here in the chat. In general, development grants are supporting those more tangible construction related phases of your project. We can support things like stormwater management systems, district-wide energy systems, public space and public art, pedestrian improvements, community engagement, and design fees that are associated with eligible activities. In the past couple of years, we have also made general construction available for affordable housing projects and economic opportunity projects that meet program goals of asset building and increased economic stability for communities who have experienced historic wealth extraction. If you have any questions about the eligibility of an activity that you want to include in your application, please just reach out. I am happy to talk through that with you before you apply. As I had mentioned earlier, with that exception of site acquisition, the LCA grants cannot pay for any work that was done before the grant was awarded. The grants are dispersed on a reimbursement basis. And if you're awarded a grant, we will go over all of this in more detail when we send you your grant agreement. Our grants administration team will offer to do an orientation with you and go over all of the details about submitting disbursement requests, what's eligible, things like that. And I'm going to post, there's a question here in the chat that I'm going to answer. So the question is, are the LCA projects that require Minneapolis or St. Paul pre-approval separate from the TOD and LCDA opportunity, or is the July 7th application only for Minneapolis and St. Paul projects that are pre-approved? So Minneapolis and St. Paul have their own application, a pre-application deadline. That July 7th deadline, or that July 7th opening date for the applications is for all cities that are applying. So the application for everyone, our application for everyone will open on July 7th and will be due on August 11th. If you've already gone through that pre-application process and have gotten confirmation that Minneapolis or St. Paul is going to sponsor your application and submit that to us, you'll work with the program staff at Minneapolis or St. Paul on completing that application. I think both of those cities also have a slightly earlier deadline so that city staff can review the application before they submit it. So make sure that you're checking in with the city staff that you're working with at Minneapolis or St. Paul to make sure that you have everything in order to be able to get started on those applications when they open up on July 7th. So going back to eligible activities, site acquisition and holding costs, general construction costs, and preservation and rehab are eligible activities that are limited to projects with affordable housing or for economic opportunity projects that are meeting the goals that are outlined in the scoring criteria. And a note on how we are looking at affordability. So housing is we consider housing to be affordable if it is at 60% AMI or below and will be affordable for at least 15 years. And the AMI level for ownership is 80% AMI. So we're looking at 60% AMI for rental and 80% AMI or below for ownership. And again, if you're interested in applying with any of these uses in your budget and you have questions about eligibility, please reach out and I'm happy to answer anything. All right, so another question pause here to see if anyone has any questions about eligible activities before we get into using our application system.
Yeah, my only question, but
Yeah.
maybe I can read on this, but when we talk about affordable housing, does that also translate to business, maybe suites, rentals, rental space? Let me clarify what I'm asking. So
Okay.
are we just talking about residential housing or is it commercial?
So great question. We don't have affordability limits around commercial space. It's a really tricky thing to calculate, and there's not general standards that are kind of generally accepted standards around affordability for commercial space, while there are around affordability for residential spaces. So in talking about our affordability limits, that is just for residential. When we're looking at commercial space, you can see in the scoring criteria that we're looking at like the business model. How is this supporting wealth building for residents of color, particularly Black residents and American Indian residents? Is this in a particular sector that we would like to see more development coming in? So we don't have specific affordability limits around commercial, but we do around residential. All right, so getting into our grants portal. Web Grants is the online application and grants management portal that the council uses. So you will use this portal to submit your application. If you are awarded a grant, this is also how you'll be submitting your semi-annual status reports and your payment requests. When you log in, you can either go to My Applications or to Funding Opportunities. I have found that Web Grants tends to have fewer issues if you're going in through Funding Opportunities. So you will select the LCDA and TOD opportunity, and the city staff person will start a new application. So this is a really important thing to remember. The city staff person needs to be the one to actually start the application and submit the application. And I think I will say that a few times throughout this session. As I had mentioned earlier, to help with collaboration, we will have a Word document available on our website, and that will also be available on July 7th. And that Word document outlines all of the narrative questions that are part of the application so that you as a team can collaborate on those questions. And then I recommend copying and pasting from the Word document into Web Grants. So city staff need to start the application, and then they will add the development team as collaborators. If you have never had a Web Grants account before, or you don't have access to the email address that you use to create your account, you will need to make a new account in Web Grants. For city staff who are on the call, please send me a list of everyone who will be collaborating on an application before anyone on the project team registers. I need to verify with the city staff person who is supposed to have access to the application. So it really just speeds up the entire process if I can get that list of folks ahead of time. We do this because we need to make sure that the applications that are being started are supported by the city and that everyone is working in the same application. If you register for an account but I haven't gotten confirmation that you are going to be working on an application with the city, I'll ask you to have the city project manager send me an email to confirm that you're working on the application. So like I had mentioned, it's much easier to have that list ahead of time, and I can quickly just approve everyone who is registering and associate them with the right application. One place that we get a lot of questions about with Web Grants is adding collaborators to the application. So once I have a list of everyone who is going to be working with the city on the application, I will link those users to a specific city. When a user is linked to a city, the city staff person will then be able to add them from a drop-down list and the general information section of the application. So the drop-down menu will have a list of everyone who is linked to that city. The city staff person who's starting the application will select the folks who are going to be associated with that application. Once you save, those folks will have access to edit in the application. And here I want to get into a little bit more detail about the administration process. These are incredibly competitive grants, so unfortunately not everyone will be awarded a grant, but if you are awarded a grant, this is the process that you will go through. So grant activities cannot start before the award is made, again, with that exception of site acquisition. This is a high-level overview, so I'm not going to go into a lot of specific details, but just keep in mind that in general, the work that the grant can pay for cannot start until after the award is made. Grants are made for specific activities as reimbursement for work that has been done, rather than a lump sum that goes directly to the project. After the city has signed the grant agreement contract with the council, the development team can start submitting payment requests to the city. The city will send us the requests for payment along with documentation of that work has been done. Those will go to our grants administration team. And it's important that you have documentation along with your requests. After the awards are made, as I had said earlier, our grants administrator will have an orientation with project teams so that you can go through exactly what you will need to submit and what to expect throughout the grants administration process. So we review those requests that are submitted to us, and then the payment goes to the city, which is then passed along to the development project team to reimburse for specific activities. And when you apply, you'll list out the specific things that you are asking for funding for. And before we move into application resources and example projects, I'm going to pause again and see if we have any questions about what we have covered so far.
Hannah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, you know what? Never mind. I think I answered my own question. I got it.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. If you want more clarification or it comes up later, feel free to just send me an email and we can chat. Great question here. How long before payments are made once you've submitted the reimbursement? So we have a timeline of 35 days once we receive your request to get that payment to the city. It typically is much faster than 35 days. The places where we don't have control is how long it takes the city to submit the reimbursement request to us, and how long it takes the city to send that funding to the project team. So what I can tell you about that process is our time from receiving the documentation to sending out the funding to the city will be less than 35 days. So
Do you know how long, what's been the average? Is it a 60-day? Is it?
That is a wonderful question that I don't know the answer to off the top of my head. I have heard people talk about 60 days. I don't know if that's the average, but I can check in with our grants team and follow up with you and get an answer to the average amount of time that it takes. Our grants administration team is kind of they are a separate team, but a team with whom our program staff work very closely. But there are some of those details, like the average amount of time that I just don't know because we don't process those requests. But I can find out and get an answer back to you. This is Tommy McNeil. All right. We have a pretty wide array of resources that are available to support you as you are completing an application. All of these resources are available on our website, either in the website body itself or as a PDF that you can download and print. On the program pages, we have all of the key information about the programs, like scoring and eligible activities. We also have a frequently asked questions section and recordings of past technical assistance webinars. Those past sessions that we have saved on our website are topic area focused and might help you better understand how your projects can meet these outlined LCA goals. These recordings are from sessions that were held a couple of years ago, but the information is still very relevant to this year. I also had gone over this program essentials document that you can download. This has the key dates, the funding amounts, the eligible activities, and the scoring criteria, along with those evaluation explanations. This is a really helpful thing to keep just as a handy, quick guide as you're going through your application. And I really just want to draw your attention to those explanations that are in the scoring criteria. In my opinion, I think these are the most helpful resource in better understanding how we're going to review and score your application. The project data profile tool is going to be mentioned in a few of the application questions. It's also linked in the application. This tool gives you a variety of information from our equity considerations dataset about the census tract where your project is located. So some of the questions in the application are going to recommend that you look at this project profile tool to help shape the answer to your question. This is also something that you can use for other grants or any work that you're doing if you just want to learn more about the census tract where your project is located. So please feel free to use this as a resource in any way that is helpful to you. I also am available as a resource for you as you are thinking about applying or when you're working on your application. Please don't hesitate to send me an email, or you can schedule a meeting with me using the bookings link on our website or in my email signature. That will just automatically add a meeting to my calendar, and it will send you a meeting invitation. I would so much rather you email me 5 times a day than feel like you are lost in completing your application. I can't tell you what to write, but I can talk through the scoring with you and go over in more detail what we're looking for and where your project best aligns. So I really recommend making an appointment to talk about your project, and to talk about the application, even if you don't think you have any specific questions. Email is absolutely the best way to get in touch with me. I do try to answer emails within 24 hours. And just a note, I don't work on Wednesday or Friday afternoons, so you'll see that reflected on my calendar. All right, we have a question here. How would new applicants find out who their assigned city staff is for submission of applications? Does the Met Council provide a list of city staff? That's a great question. We do not provide a list of city staff since that changes pretty frequently. If there are any new applicants who have not already gotten in touch with the city, send me an email and I am happy to connect you to the right person at the city. Different cities do it different ways. For example, in Minneapolis, they have one person who coordinates everything. In St. Paul, the applicants work more closely with a project manager in their planning department. So different cities have a different process. So if you have any questions about that, please just reach out and I'm happy to connect you. All right, so I'm going to go over a few past successful applications and talk about what made them successful. So this project here is an affordable housing project that is designed to serve families who have had recent child protection interactions, have been unhoused, or are experiencing some kind of housing instability. The goal of the project is to provide stable housing alongside with supportive services like education and job training. The project includes several family-sized units that are at or below 30% AMI. And a few things stood out about this project during the review process. Most of the units in the project are below 30% AMI, and 7 of those units had 3 or 4 bedrooms at 30% AMI, which is not something that we see terribly often. In addition to those deeply affordable units, the project was really thoughtful in providing services in the building that would help support families finding more stability. And the engagement process was led by Juxtaposition Arts, which is a local youth arts organization, and they included families in the neighborhood who had experienced housing instability, as well as including service providers to provide recommendations on the building design and programming. So here we saw that the project team was really intentional about bringing in partners who had experience working with the targeted population that would be served by the project, and who had lived expertise in the area that the project was focusing on. So again, that combination of deep affordability and intention and project design made this project stand out. This is an example of a non-housing project. This is the 30,000 feet project. This is an arts and tech center led by the Black Arts and Tech Group, 30,000 feet. The center would provide training and internships for youth, primarily youth of color. The project team will hire instructors of color to prepare youth for careers in the arts and in tech. So this is an example of a project that is focused on workforce development and job creation in an area that is seeing higher unemployment for residents and with residents who are most likely to be experiencing economic disparities. The project team really thought about how to physically and programmatically connect the center to a nearby high school and to help reduce barriers to participation for local youth. The team that was putting the project together had experience working with youth of color, particularly Black youth, through their previous programming. And this gave them more insight how to best meet the needs of youth participating in the programs and to really make those strong programmatic connections to youth in the area. And the last example that we have for you is an example with more of a TOD perspective. So this is the opportunity site. This is an intentional development that will begin a larger effort to transform this 80-acre opportunity site. So this site was previously a large hub of abandoned big box stores, and the city is leading a pretty long process to create a new vision for this site that better reflects changing communities and priorities. So what came out of that process is a new modern downtown for the city. This project was awarded TOD funds for a component of the project that included 24-hour childcare and an academic learning center, along with 60 units of deeply affordable housing, again, having some of those larger family-sized units. And there were a few things that stood out about this project in the review process. So with this project, the city was very involved in how this project fit into a larger system plan and a community-informed vision for the area. That plan was for a dense, walkable, and affordable development that would serve community needs and connect to available opportunities in the region. There's also a mix of uses included, and there was thought around how each of those uses contributed to an identified community need. So there were commercial uses that provided specific services, opportunities for living wage jobs, and a range of affordability levels and housing that specifically served families. All right, so going over some specific tips for successful projects. A big one is to tell the story of your project. One thing I've taken from another grant program is we want to know why this project now and why are you the right team to be doing this project? We want to know about your connection to the project and the project area. So why is this team interested in doing this project? What connection do you have there? And what are the goals that you are trying to accomplish with this project? You'll see in the application that the first question is to describe your project. And this is where we really want to know, what are you doing? What are you hoping to build? Why are you the team to be doing this? Second tip I can give you is to talk with program staff before you submit an application. It is really helpful to talk through your project, alignment with the program, how competitive you might be, and areas in your project that you might want to highlight that have the strongest alignment with our goals. And finally, review those evaluation explanations. Try doing a self-score to see how your project might do. And really pay attention to those examples of how you can achieve points as you're going through and crafting the narratives in your application. Like I had mentioned earlier, I can't tell you what to write. I can't review a draft of your application and offer notes, but I'm happy to talk through the project and how it might align best with our goals. All right, so before I get into some frequently asked questions that we have, I am going to stop and see if we have any additional questions from folks on the call. And again, you can just come off mute, you can put them in the chat, you can raise your hand, whatever feels most comfortable for you. All right, I'll start going through these frequently asked questions. And then again, if you have any questions, please jump in. What attachments are required? So we have a list of required attachments in the application, and we do have a page limit of 10 pages per attachment, with the exception of the Equitable Development Scorecard. That scorecard, I think, is 19 or 20 pages. You can upload the entire scorecard, but for any other attachments, there is a limit of 10 pages. So if you're wanting to submit part of a comprehensive plan, small area plan, please don't submit the entire plan. Please pull out the sections that are most relevant to your project and submit those. We do require a resolution of support, a site plan, some kind of renderings of the project, and we have make a map maps that are available from the LCA website. So you'll see that link in the application. It will prompt you to make 3 maps. There will be a parcel map, an aerial map, and an overview map that you'll download PDFs and then upload those with your application. For projects that are requesting funding for stormwater management and site acquisition, we will be asking for your stormwater management plan and either an appraisal or a broker's opinion on the value of the property that you're requesting acquisition funds for. Again, please limit your attachments to 10 pages. If your attachments are more than 10 pages, we will ask you to revise those attachments and send new attachments that meet that page limit. You'll see some guidance on naming the attachments. Please follow that guidance. It just makes it a lot easier for us as program staff to not have to rename all of your attachments. And just a note on how we review the applications. So program staff will review your application for completion and accuracy. So we'll go through and make sure that you have all of the attachments that you need, that you've answered all of the questions. Make sure there's not inconsistency in numbers, for example. So if you've filled out the housing table and then in your narrative, there's a different breakdown of housing units, we will flag that and we'll give you the opportunity to make corrections to your application before those applications are sent to our review team. So once you submit your application, I will send you an email, let you know that I've received your application. And it usually takes me about a week to go through all of the applications and review them again just for completion and accuracy. If there are any changes that need to be made, I will send it back to you. You'll have a few days to make corrections, and then those corrected versions of the applications will go on to our review committee. The review committee doesn't know what was corrected. They don't know the communication that we've had. So anything that needs to be corrected in your application, don't worry, that doesn't have any impact on your score. Another question that we get a lot is, do you score on the budget items in the application? We do not score on the budget or what it is requested. So we don't score on the amount that you're requesting for. We don't score on the activities that you're requesting funding for. Again, we will review them just to make sure that they are eligible, but it doesn't have any impact on your score. I'm going to pause again here and see if we have any questions.
I guess this is just the odd question as we wrap up.
Go for it.
What have historically been something that would have prevented people from moving forward?
That is a great question. So typically where we see projects scoring a bit lower are in the affordability levels. So projects that are primarily market rate or don't have those any units that are really looking at affordability bands at 31 to 50 or below 30% AMI. We see some challenges with those projects being able to move forward. On the commercial side of things, projects that don't have some kind of connection to, I guess this is true of housing as well. We're looking at how connected your project is to the community that you are serving. And community can be described really broadly. So when we say community, we don't necessarily mean geographic community. I think the project team often has a very good idea of what community means for them. The other area where we see projects struggle some is in that representation piece. So if the project team doesn't have any connection to the area, if there aren't meaningful partnerships that are part of the development team, if the project team is kind of meeting the bare minimum of engagement and only having like an open house or presentations to city council, that's typically where we see some projects struggle. So again, we're really looking at, that kind of gets back to this, why this project now and why are you the right team to be doing it? We want to know how your project is connected to the community. How are you connected to this project? So I think those are the things that stand out for me most and where projects tend to struggle. Another question that we get is, how do we choose which applications to fund? So typically what we will do is we will go by score. So we will rank the projects based on score and allocate funding accordingly. We do offer partial funding. So if your project is kind of on the edge, it's not an all or nothing. You are able to get partial funding. If you're in a situation where your project is being recommended for partial funding, I will reach out to you as the project team, check to make sure that you're interested in getting partial funding, and then we'll see if we need to make any adjustments to the budget and the activities that you have requested.
So partial funding would represent what? Just a percentage of what you applied for, or what?
Yeah, so it'd be part of what you applied for, and it really depends on, so it depends on a few things. It depends on how much funding we have left, and we really see the partial funding, I think we see the partial funding coming in most at that geographic limit. So if you're at the $2 million mark for projects that are getting funding from TOD, or if you're on the edge of that 40-60 geographic split for projects that are getting funding from LCA, that's typically where we see the partial, excuse me, the partial funding coming into play. We also see it if you're like at the edge of being funded or not being funded. So typically what we will do is look to see how much funding we have left and give you the most, the highest amount of funding that we can based on what we have available. So sometimes it could be 90% of your requests, sometimes it could be 10% of your requests. It just depends on how much funding we have available. And like I said, we'll check in with the project team and just make sure that you are interested in still receiving a partial award. All right, so we have, are there cities outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul that the council is targeting? And are there businesses or housing developments that the council is most interested in? Another great question. There aren't specific cities that we are necessarily targeting. There are those 78 cities that are participating in LCA. So your project could be in any of those 78 cities. We do have some specific funding limits around projects in Minneapolis and St. Paul. So there is more funding available for projects that are outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul. In terms of business and housing developments that we're most interested in, like I said earlier, we're really looking for that community connection piece. And outside of that, that's where we're looking at affordable housing, really have a priority on deeply affordable housing, so 30% AMI or below. looking at affordable ownership opportunities, although most affordable home ownership opportunities go in through our affordable home ownership program. So you have a whole separate program about affordable home ownership. In terms of businesses or commercial developments, that's where we're looking at asset building for residents of color, job training, incubation spaces, that kind of thing. So I think if you look at our those program essentials that I added into the chat, those examples that are in there will give you a really good idea of exactly what we're looking for. But with the cities, any of the 78 cities that are participating in LCA are eligible to apply. The last question that we get often is, should I apply to LCDA or TOD? That question is very easy this year. You don't need to apply to either. You just send us an application for LCDA and TOD funding opportunity. If your project is in a TOD area, you'll answer some specific questions around orientation to transit. If your project is not in a TOD area, you don't need to worry about those questions. So you don't need to make a decision about LCDA or TOD. It's a combined application and essentially a combined funding pot. All right, in our last 2 minutes, do we have any final questions from folks? All right, well, to close us out, I have my name and email here on the slide. You can also find my email address on our website. Like I said, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I am serious that I would rather have you email me multiple times a day than feel like you don't have support or you don't, you have a lot of questions and you just don't know how to move forward with an application. You can send me an email. You can use my bookings link and add a meeting to my calendar. Email is definitely the best way to get in touch with me. And we will have a recording of this webinar up on our website. Like I said, we shoot for within 3 days. We are in a pretty busy time with our programs and it's a short week, but we will do our best to get this up as soon as we can. Thank you all again so much for joining this morning, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you, Hannah. Take care.
You too.
Thanks, Hannah.